Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's Dolby Cinema Processor CP950 webinar. I am Deborah Lawrence, Project Specialist for Dolby Cinema Products. I'd now like to introduce you to our presenters today, JP Jackson, Product Manager for Cinema Products, and Bill Stroop, Senior Cinema Product Support Engineer.
Hello, everyone. I'm JP Jackson.
And I'm Bill Stroop.
Thanks for attending the Dolby webinar today covering the CP950. The webinar was created to help you get a better understanding of our product and to help get you well prepared to have good success with the Dolby CP950. So with that, I'll turn off this webcam, let you see the presentation, and we'll get started. The CP950 is the latest release of Dolby Cinema processors. The CP950 was designed with Dolby exhibitor partners operations in mind. It's designed to be easy to use, service, and install. Some of the new features that are included in the 950 include the built-in booth monitor, which is a first for a Dolby processor, the intuitive touchscreen front panel interface, the web interface for enhanced access and usability, the internal loudspeaker crossovers, high resolution multi-rate EQ, also has a 16 channels of analog output, and of course the Dolby Atmos Connect, which is our audio over Ethernet, supporting both AES67 and BlueLink.
Thanks, JP. I'm going to walk you through the front panel and we can look at some of the things that we just went over. As you can see, I'll work from left to right. You'll see the main fader knob on the left, and then to the right of that, the intuitive touch screen. You can see that by default, we show the fader level, status, meters. You can change inputs with the buttons on the right. You can look at the configuration, look for alerts, status updates, that sort of thing. To the right of that, the smaller fader knob is for the internal built-in monitor, and that speaker is behind the grill to the right. Next, we'll look at the rear panel, and again, I'll walk from left to right. So first, there are 16 channels of analog outputs and the two 25-pin D-sub connectors. These supply analog audio. You can run that directly then to an amplifier or whatever you like downstream. Next to that are the hearing impaired and visually impaired analog outputs in the standard RCA type connector. Moving to the right again, the microphone and mic gain trim pot for the microphone and RTA. You can use this for microphone announcements and that sort of thing in the XLR type connector. And it also accepts a microphone for the internal RTA of the CP950 for doing EQ. Moving again to the right, the two non-sync connectors are standard RCA type for analog inputs. Next to that, there are two one-time AES inputs for encoded audio like Dolby Digital and Dolby Digital Plus. You'll see the two RJ45s that say 8 times AES in. That's for the now fairly standard AES audio type out from most IMB, IMS type server media blocks. The Dolby Atmos Connect next to that you can see is two RJ45s. This has become now standard in CP850, IMS 3000, and downstream Dolby devices like the DMA and DAC 3202. The USB port, you'll notice you can pull logs and configuration from the unit. Above all these things, you can see the expansion card for Atmos support in the future. This is just a placeholder card with two screws. In the future, when we have that card available, you'll just remove the placeholder and insert the new card. Going back down to the ports next to the USB, you'll see there's one HDMI in and one HDMI out. This will support HDMI 2.0 and HDCP 2.2 protocol. Next to that is the command network port. This is a standard Ethernet port. This is how you will connect to the CP950 for controlling and monitoring the unit. You can send automation commands, that sort of thing. And then finally, the 9-pin RS-232 port for ASCII commands, so you can trigger macro changes, volume, and other automation commands. And then the very far right, we have our power supply, which has two fans on top and the power plug, and of course we support 100 to 240 volts.
All right, so the CP950, again, is designed to be the replacement for the CP750, so pretty much a direct replacement with extra features. the following slides will show some of the differences. So the CP750 is an 8-channel processor, which typically requires some additional devices working in conjunction with the processor for a complete installation. One of the components is the booth monitor, and another is the crossover capability for the screen channels. That could be internal to the booth monitor or could be a separate device. But with the CP950, now that has a booth monitor built in and it has internal crossovers like the CP850 did. So based on that, in the near future, the CP750 will be withdrawn from sale. Dolby has not yet announced the withdrawal from sale date, but we will be doing that shortly. In the near future, we'll send out communications on that.
The CP950 functionality is improved from the 750. The CP750, as you may know, is an 8-channel processor, no internal crossover support, but the 950 is a 16-channel processor with internal crossover support. It's important to note the types of auditoriums that you'll be installing the CP950 into. We support 5.1 or 7.1 full range, which would need 6 or 8 channels. If you're biamping 3-stage channels into 5.1 or 7.1, then that would be 9 or 11 channels respectively. At maximum use of the internal crossovers, triamping, and that sort of thing, you would need 12 or 14 channels respectively. The CP950 also supports bass management. With 2 bass management subwoofers in the room, 16 channels would then be the maximum output. If quad amp is needed, then an external crossover would be required, or you could use the crossovers and routing of the DMA amplifier downstream.
All right, so that's some of the reasons why we believe the CP950 is the perfect CP750 replacement, enabling the setup with the most common configurations without additional hardware. In addition to that, the CP950 has an expansion port for the Dolby Atmos media block. This will make the unit a CP950 Plus when that's available. Once the card is installed, the unit's available channels will expand from 16 to 64, and the result is a fully functional Dolby Atmos processor.
When connecting from an audio processor to a DMA, that's improved from the CP750 to the 950. So for example, if you had a CP750 and you were connecting to the DMA, you would need a 25-pin analog cable, and you'd have to make sure that you had a DMA that had the 302 model. In other words, it has the analog input card to accept analog output. With the CP950, we're able to connect directly with an Ethernet cable and use the Dolby Atmos Connect protocol, which is our implementation of AES67. The CP950 does also support BlueLink protocol, which would be used in those types of devices. So here's an example. It's a very simple connection. You would go to the Dolby Atmos Connect out, and you connect your Cat6 cable to the in of the DMA or DAC3202.
The CP950 introduces an LCD touchscreen, which allows a user to control basic functions of the system. On the right-hand side are navigation buttons for different sections of the user interface. The home screen, what you see is the default view, and at the top left is the mute control. You tap the white speaker icon to engage the mute, then tap it again to unmute. Next to the speaker icon is the current fader level, the IP address of the CP950, followed by the name of the active macro. The input status displays the status of the AES3 or HDMI input, depending on which macro is selected, and the audio meters show the signal level on all the channels. The second icon accesses the macros screen. The available macros are displayed, and the active macro is shown in green. Tap on the macro to see 2 choices. The first option activates the macro, and the second displays the macro details. Most of the macro detail is simply informational, but the default fader level may be changed when the active macro is available. So then any active alerts will be shown in the Alerts tab. Click on the small icon for more detailed explanation. Then we have input status that shows the 8x AES input status. Green indicates a good connection, yellow indicates an intermittent connection, while red indicates that the channels are required for this macro, but there is no connection. And gray indicates that the channels are not needed for the macro and that there is no connection. Bitstream information is also available when using a coded input like Dolby Digital. And there is a support tab with contact information for Dolby Cinema solutions and support. The final icon shows system settings. Device tools allow the user to select what is audible from the booth monitor speaker. Bypass center channel will route all the center channel audio to left and right speakers, which is used when a speaker component in the center channel may be broken. And let's see, the phantom power on the microphone XLR connector can be enabled or disabled, and also a soft reboot from the CP950 can be commanded from here. The command network then allows a change to basic network settings for the CP950's command network. And finally, the About This Device tab displays the software version, hardware, serial numbers, and other useful information. So most of the setup tasks will actually be done in the CP950 web user interface. Any browser may be used, but Dolby recommends Google Chrome to connect to the unit. This user interface is largely based on the CP850 web UI, so anyone that's familiar with the CP850 should be comfortable with this interface. The basic functions are found at the top, like macro selection, booth monitor, main fader level, mute, unmute. The main navigation then is on the left side. Macros are configured in the macro editor. For equalization, the CP950 supports standard 5.1 or 7.1 EQ like the CP750, or the user can EQ a 5.1, 7.1 room using Dolby's Auto EQ through the Dolby Atmos Designer software. It's important to note here that if the CP950 internal crossovers are to be used, the Dolby Atmos Designer is required. The Auditorium tab shows basic information about the room. The new Configure Room tab can be used when the installer does not wish to use Dolby Atmos Designer or internal crossovers. Pre-configured 5.1 or 7.1 rooms are selectable here. You would select a room with the correct output type. So if you're installing with the analog outputs of the CP950, select an analog room. And if you're using the Dolby Atmos Connect ports, select a digital room. On the Preferences tab, some of the basic functions may be changed, such as switching the Dolby Atmos Connect protocols. And then next is the Logs button, which allows browsing of the detailed system reports or downloading a logs package for offline review. User access provides the capability to change passwords. The Network tab to change network configurations, including the settings for the Dolby Atmos Connect. The Maintenance tab, use that to update the system and to back up or restore settings. And then from the Reboot tab, a soft reboot of the CP950 can be commanded. All of the CP950 manuals, web services, configuration, SNMP, MIBs are hosted on the Documentation tab, and Dolby has included the current version of the Dolby Atmos Designer software for Windows and Mac in this section. The last item is support. This tab contains contact information for Dolby Cinema Solutions and support. And then one of the new features there is the detailed alerting. When an alert is present, the user can click on details, which will open a new browser tab with additional troubleshooting information, including pictures and diagrams.
For the Cinema Server integration, the DSS200 and DSS220 We'll have new software released in 494, which will allow for the fader macro control of the 950, similar to how we previously supported this for the CP650, CP750, and CP850. A Q bundle package will be ingested into the server if you're using a Doremi DCP2000, DCP2K4, Show Vault, IMS 1000, 2000, and we'll have the commands already in there for all our Dolby Cinema sound processors.
Okay, so as previously mentioned, the CP950 was designed with service technicians in mind, and the unit itself can be broken down into several major components for easy replacement of failed parts. The first is the CAT1740 power supply. You unplug the power cord and locate the two screws that hold the power supply into the chassis. Once these two screws are removed, the power supply can be pulled straight out of the unit. This module allows for easy fan replacement or system fuses on the bottom of the card. The fuse holders can accept 5 by 20 millimeter or 6.3 by 32 millimeter fuses. And then the CAT1700 main board contains all the inputs and outputs and processing for the CP950. There are two captive thumb screws. Once they are unscrewed, the card can be pulled straight out of the back of the unit. Above the CAT1700, there's also that blank plate that Bill described earlier for the future Dolby Atmos expansion card. This can be removed by unscrewing its two captive thumb screws and then pulling it out of the back of the unit.
Continuing with the modular design, we also have the CAT1720 front panel. This contains the two fader knobs, the LCD display, and the booth monitor speaker as one unit. To remove it from the chassis, you locate and unscrew the top and bottom screws on the rack ears, and then leave the two middle screws in place, and then pull this CAT1720 straight out of the CP950 chassis. This is a view from the rear of the CAT1720, where the connection from the speaker to the circuit board can be seen. There are also connectors for the CAT1740 power supply on the right, the CAT1700 main board in the center bottom, and the future CAT1710 will plug into that top middle connector. Once the modules have been removed, all that remains is the chassis sheet metal.
Okay, so yeah, as we mentioned earlier, the CP950 has been designed to accommodate the CAT1710 expansion card for future upgradability to Dolby Atmos. This upgraded hardware will be called the CP950 Plus. Supporting Dolby Atmos will require more power also, so the CP950 Plus units will come with a CAT1740 power supply, higher wattage power supply, already pre-installed. And then for the warranty information, the CP950 comes with a 3-year hardware warranty standard, 5-year software maintenance, and then we will have extended hardware warranty available. So this next image shows a table with comparisons between the CP750, 850, 950, and then the future CP950 Plus. You can kind of get a good idea of the enhancements that have been made from the CP750 all the way up to the 950 now. Some of the notes there, the LCD touchscreen, the built-in booth monitor that we've not had before in other products, the web interface, etc. All right, so this basically concludes the Dolby Cinema Processor CP950 overview. So for more information, please contact Dolby Cinema Solutions and Support or a Dolby sales representative. And with that, I will turn it back over to Deborah.
Thanks, JP. Thanks, Bill. We're now going to begin answering the questions submitted during today's presentation. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel.
How loud does the booth monitor go? Yeah, I will say that we've done testing in cinemas during a beta profile. It's reasonably loud. I think that's probably something we can specify in terms of sound pressure, but our experience has been it's loud enough to hear it in typical booth configurations. What are the operating temperatures, and does the CP950 require an actively cooled rack?
It does not require an actively cooled rack, so the standard operating temperature is 0 C to 40 C, 32 Fahrenheit or 104 Fahrenheit.
The question is, will the CP950 connect via Ethernet cable to the QSE DPA amplifiers? The DPA amplifiers use QSE's protocol. We are interoperable with the QSE QSys core. If you want to connect to the DPA amplifiers, you would have to connect the CP950 to a QSE QSys core, and then on QSE's protocol, connect from the QSys core directly to the input of the DPA amplifiers. But the DPA amplifiers do not natively support AS67, so the QSys core is required as a bridge between the CP950 and their amplifiers. Are there any functions hidden behind licensed updates?
There are not any hidden functions currently with the CP950. Everything that's available is available with the standard unit.
JP, so the question is the HDMI input, audio and video. Maybe you can talk a little bit as to the functionality of the HDMI.
Yep, the HDMI input accepts audio and video, but it'll pass through the video portion only. So it's HDMI 2.0 and HDCP 2.2 certified currently.
So the next question is, how are pricing plans regards to the CP950 Atmos Media Block or CP950 Plus purchase versus a CP850? One of the things that we didn't cover initially is the pricing of the CP950 in the current configuration. One of Dolby's goals was to introduce this product at the same list price point as the CP750, but with this new feature set. The HDMI input, the booth monitors, the internal crossover, the 16-channel capabilities, and the expansion capabilities. Similarly, when we have Atmos functionality, the cost for the Atmos license itself will be consistent with the cost of the Atmos license for the CP850 and the IMS 3000. We have not announced pricing yet on what the cost of the CAT 1710 media block is, but the hardware cost is going to be lower than the current hardware cost of the CP850. And we envision the pricing to be lower than the current price of the CP850 today. Once Dolby has pricing information available to share, we'll make sure to distribute that information to the dealer and customer network at that time. So is there any lip sync delay for the HDMI input, or what's the processing delay for the HDMI? Like the CP850, within each macro, there is an ability to control AV synchronization independently for each input. The thing that JP is looking at up is what the native input to output latency on the device is. Generally speaking, it's going to be consistent with the CP850, especially for coded audio, where we need at least a full frame of latency to actually decode a Dolby bit stream, whether it is Dolby Digital Plus, Dolby Digital, or True HD. And that initial latency is around 40 milliseconds for one frame of image and audio, and then place whatever the latency is on the input to output.
Yeah, right now the HDMI input, the minimum audio delay is 80 milliseconds.
How flexible is the unit with respect to future feature upgrades? It says, can you add things like time alignment in the future? Can you talk to some of those items?
The way that the device was designed is that there's things obviously that could be designed for the hardware expansion. The priority there is the Atmos expansion card, but there are things that can be done in software based on the design of the device. So there's no current plans for extra functionality, but things can be added. It's not stuck, I would say. It's an upgradable design.
Does the two SPDIF or the 2 times AES inputs support only 2-channel audio, or is there other audio that's supported on those inputs?
That supports coded audio as well.
They're mainly Dolby Digital and Dolby Digital Plus.
Correct.
Next question, is the booth monitor protected by a compressor and limiter?
Yes, it is.
Does the unit support all Dolby audio standards and playing PCM over HDMI?
Yes, it does.
Sure.
Dolby
Jackson.
Digital, Dolby Digital Plus, True HD, PCM.
And is the PCM 2-channel or up to 7.1?
On HDMI, up to 7.1.
The next question is if the front panel settings, such as IP configurations, protected via a password.
Yeah, the settings, there's actually limited settings that can be done on the front panel, but the IP address, the network setup is one of those, but they are not currently password protected. The idea behind that is that the processors are generally in a booth situation that is controlled access. So the web interface has complete password protection for remote access, but the front panel doesn't really have any protection because the assumption is the box itself is physically protected.
All right, JP, your next question is how do the HDMI ports interact with the EDID chain? Yeah, for just the sake of everyone on the call, if EDID is a protocol used over HDMI as part of the device discovery, and there's a communication back and forth between sending devices and receiving devices of their capability. If the HDMI source is connected to the CP850 and the CP850 HDMI, CP950, output is not connected to display the device, the CP950 will only report back the audio information in the EDID. If there is a projector on the HDMI output, if you're passing through to the image device, the CP950 will report back its audio EDID information and the capabilities or the EDID information of the display device that the HDMI output is connected to. How is home Atmos over True HD from a Blu-ray supported?
Currently, we don't support overheads on the CP950, so it's rendered only to 5.1 or 7.1 depending on the room configuration.
But if someone has a Dolby Atmos over True HD or Dolby Digital Plus, the CP950 will decode that bit stream. That's correct?
That's correct.
The next question is if the CP950 has Toslink. And no, if you look on the rear panel, we did not put an optical Toslink connection on the CP950. And I will say that in our interest of cost optimization, we took a very strong look at the type of connectors that we were providing and interviewed a lot of our customers to understand which most common interfaces were being used. We'd love to provide all the input types, but practically speaking, that drives up a lot of cost. And so certain IOs were eliminated from this product in order to deliver something that's feature-rich and cost optimized. The next question is pertaining to the HDMI input, and it says, if we are handling content with DTS streams, will we still need to use a separate de-embedder? And the one thing that we recommend for the CP950 and the CP850 or IMS 3000 for that matter is if you are playing back DTS content, is to get a source device that is actually capable of decoding the DTS bit stream into a multi-channel PCM stream over HDMI. There are a few Blu-ray players on the market or even devices like the Xbox that can actually decode the DTS bit stream and then would hand over to the cinema processor multi-channel PCM over the HDMI for playback. Otherwise, an outboard de-embedder is another option for you. And JP, the next question for you is it the full status feedback through the unit's API?
Yeah, the API is actually based on the CP850, so all the same functionality that's there is available.
how noisy is the unit itself, fans, etc.? The customer is saying that they have a few sites that need to have the devices installed behind the screen in a sound rack. And I wanted to know how noisy the CP950 is.
It's not considerably more noisy than other equipment, but I mean, there is noise emitted from the fans. It's not louder than any other equipment, but I don't have the actual decibel level.
And JP, what would your recommendation be if someone had their equipment rack in the auditorium behind the screen? Would they require a sound deadening equipment rack, or would the CP950 work behind the screen?
Sound deadening equipment rack would be recommended. Question is if I can lock the touch panel with a pin. Currently, there is no password or PIN number on the front panel. The idea originally was that the processor is generally in a booth or in a controlled environment. Obviously, the web UI has password protection, but the front panel currently does not. When you log with the web UI, does it lock the user from the touch panel? So when you log into the web UI, you can't make changes on the front panel. That's correct. Will the 850 remain internal on the IMS 3000, or will that be going away? There's no current plans to stop the audio processor on the IMS 3000, so that will continue to be an option, the IMS 3000 with the audio processor built in. Can we do an equalization using one microphone directly with the processor? Yeah, you can plug a microphone into the RTA input and do the equalization there in the web UI. You also have the ability to use the Dolby Atmos designer, but you can do a basic equalization directly on the unit itself. Is there a crossover board? We do have internal speaker crossovers that's built into the unit. As Toslink is gone, is it the HDMI used for alternate content? Yes, that's correct. HDMI has become the most popular input for alternative content like that, so that's why we stuck with the HDMI input. Are there plans for A to D converter for the 8-channel analog input, or will it just be the analog card on the DMA? Currently, there is no plan for an A to D converter built into the 950, but yeah, a separate device would be required right now. Can we use a DAC 3202 with a CP950 for making the crossover of a triamp or quad amp? The 3202 doesn't provide extra channels, so you would have to use the crossovers on a DMA, for example, or a separate crossover. Does it do EQ automatically for 5.1? If you use the Dolby Atmos designer, you can use the auto EQ. Without the Dolby Atmos designer, we do have a preset for a 5.1 room, but you would still have to do a manual EQ with the web UI. Does the unit support DTS encoded bit streams over the HDMI input? You would have to have the DTS decoded prior to the HDMI. So if you have your Blu-ray that is capable of outputting the multi-channel bit stream, that would have to be done prior to the HDMI input. Can I take input of sources via BlueLink or AES67 from non-Dolby sources like a QSys Core or a BSS processor? We're not supporting input by AES67 or BlueLink currently. It's just output. How long will spares for the CP750 be available from Dolby? We expect to support the CP750 for at least 5 years from the time we announce the withdrawal from sale. So that communication again will be out soon, and all the necessary dates will be included in that communication. Does the CP950 have a 2.0 to 5.1 upmix function like the 750 and the DMA 8+? Yes, it does have that controlled in the macro editor and the web UI. You can tell it to upmix 2.0 to 5.1. Does the auto EQ function require a full Atmos commissioning kit, i.e. 5 to 8 mics, or can it be done with fewer microphones? It can be done with fewer microphones. The Dolby Atmos Designer software is the same that you would use for an Atmos room. You can use fewer microphones for a 5171 room. Question, if using the auto EQ, do you need to create a complete DAD file like you would for Atmos? All room dimensions, etc. Yes, that is basically the same as an Atmos room using the Dolby Atmos Designer. It's just configured for a 5.1 or 7.1, but you still put in the same information and create a room config that gets pushed to the 950. Under what circumstances would one connect a real-time analyzer to the XLR jack at the back? If you're not using DAD, you can use the real-time analyzer connected to the unit itself, and the web UI will have display for the real-time analyzer, and then you can make manual EQ adjustments in the web UI. Is the LFE output low pass filtered? Yes, that is correct. Is the HI output fixed level, or is it controlled by the main fader level?
The HI is fixed. We're doing line level out for the hearing impaired. If it's coming from the HI track on the DCP, we do also have a bypass similar to the CP850 that if you disable HI from any one of the channels in the active macro, then we'll do our own LCR mix from the left, center, and right. That would then be affected by the fader level. But if you're using the dedicated HI track from the DCP, it's a fixed level out.
What is the default password of the web interface? Basically the same defaults as the previous processor, so admin, and those can be changed if necessary. Do we have a photo of the CAT 1710 Atmos card? Do not currently have a photo. We have begun working on that. It's not released as of yet. We're looking at probably about a year, but we'll make an announcement about the release when we get closer to that. So no pictures yet. Is there a remote fader control for the CP950? Currently there is not, but we're working on a solution, so we will have an announcement about that. Is it possible to mix LCR into the left-right output?
So we have the center channel bypass, which would do exactly that, but we intend center channel bypass as an emergency measure for if you have any kind of center channel issues, whether it be downstream with a speaker, say, the classic blown driver situation on your center channel, which of course is a huge headache. You could just enable center channel bypass, and we will take the center channel and then split it 50-50 between left and right. Then left and right will be doing 100% of the stage audio. So in that regard, yes, we do. We do also design it so that if you reboot the unit, it will turn that feature off. So it's not something that we have as a dedicated macro or a dedicated function that you'd be using 24 hours a day. But we do have it in there as something that you can do to bypass to get you out of a bad
Right.
spot.
Are the system command lines different from the CP750?
The main difference is that the CP750 is no longer in the command string. We use the exact same ASCII command strings, for whether it be RS-232 or Ethernet. We use the same ones for both, and we took the exact same ones from the CP850. You'll notice they're a similar protocol. So, for example, sys.fader being 0 or 1, sys.mute being 0 or 1 will turn mute on or off. Previously, that was CP750.sys.mute space and then 0 or 1. Then with the CP850, we just got rid of the CP750 part. So it's just sys.mute. And then the exact same command works for the 850 and for the 950. They're slightly different than the 750, but they're identical to the CP850 and they're all very similar.
When is the Atmos upgrade card expected? We haven't announced the date yet, but it's going to be about a year before that is available. So we have a phased approach to release the standard CP950 and withdraw the CP750 for sale. And then we'll release the Atmos card again, like about a year later, and following that, withdraw from sale the CP850. Any plans to offer crossover use via the web UI in the future? It's not planned right now, so currently we have most of the advanced functionality in the DAD, the Dolby Atmos Designer software. Not to say that it won't happen, but it's not currently scheduled.
But as a follow-up to that, JP, when you configure the crossover filters in the DMA, that is done through the web UI.
That's correct.
in case that helps at all.
With that, I'd like to say thank you, and I'll turn it back over to Deborah.
Thank you, JP and Bill, and thanks to everyone for attending today's CP950 webinar. If you have any other questions, please contact me at dlawr@dolby.com. On behalf of Dolby Laboratories, thank you for joining us today and have a great rest of your day.